Good day, and welcome to the BMC Control-M Technical Series webinar. Today's webinar is being recorded. At this time, I would like to turn the webinar over to Michiel Tiller. Please begin.
Hi, welcome everybody. Welcome to this Connect with Control-M session on Control-M for file transfer. And today we're focusing on SFTP. I'm Michiel Tiller, a technical support analyst at the Control-M Distributed Systems team at BMC Customer Support, and I've been with BMC Software for 14 years. So let's look at our agenda for today. Today we're going to talk about Control-M for file transfer in relation to SFTP transfers. We'll look at a brief overview of Control-M for file transfer. We'll look at what SFTP is, how to set up a basic SFTP transfer. We'll have a look at using key authentication and host keys, what are they, and we'll look at some additional resources, and at the end we'll have a Q&A session. If you have any questions, please enter them into the Q&A panel and we'll discuss them afterwards. So Control-M for file transfer, a brief overview. Here we see the Control-M environment. In the top left, you can see the Control-M Workload Automation or Enterprise Manager, the GUI where we define jobs and upload them to Control-M Server. The Control-M Server actually schedules the jobs and transfers them to the Control-M agent who then runs them. And this is where Control-M for file transfer is installed and transfers files between FTP or SFTP servers. As you can see here, Control-M for file transfer can connect to an SFTP server and transfer a file from that server to another SFTP server. Control-M for file transfer acts as an SFTP client in this sense, so it's not an SFTP server, it'll need an SFTP server to connect to. So what exactly is SFTP? SFTP is a file transfer feature provided by SSH, Secure Shell. It's a built-in feature of SSH and uses SSH's encrypted communication channels to transfer files. It's not the same as FTPS. It's often confused with that. FTPS stands for FTP over SSL or TLS, which is an entirely different protocol, a different mechanism than SFTP. That's not what we'll be discussing today. And again, Control-M for file transfer is an SFTP client. It needs to connect to servers. You can see here, Control-M for file transfer is often abbreviated as AFT. So when I mention AFT later on, what I mean is Control-M for file transfer. So let's look at how to set up a basic SFTP job. Today we're a Control-M administrator named Bob, and we get an email from Alice asking us to set up a file transfer job, but it needs to use SFTP. So Alice has given us the login details of the source and destination servers and is asking if we can actually make this work. Now let's see how you go about doing that. So let me share my demo environment here. So the first place you'd need to go would be the Control-M Configuration Manager. Here you can see Control-M for file transfer. And the first thing you need to do there is go to the Connection Profile Management. This is where you set up the connection profiles which tells Control-M for file transfer which hosts the files need to be transferred between. So this window will pop up and we can click the plus button to add a new profile. So the first thing we need to do is to give the profile a name. So let me give me the name of the company that Alice gave me. And I can select users. These are Control-M users that are allowed to actually define jobs using this profile. So I can select various users here, remove them. If I want to actually authorize anyone to use this profile, what I can do is double click in this window here on the right And now I'll be able to type in names, and I can also use wildcards, so I can actually put in asterisks here, press enter, and that'll mean everyone will be allowed to use this profile. So I'm going to do that here. Then click next. So here I'll need to fill in the details for host 1, which is a remote host, not the local AFT host. So I'll untick this local CM button, and I'll start filling in the host details that Alice sent me in our email. So that's the host name. The OS type for SFTP, this almost always needs to be set to Unix. So even if it's a Windows or OpenVNS box, set this to Unix because SFTP mimics a Unix file system. The port, before I fill in that, I'm going to switch from FTP to SFTP here, and we'll notice that the port changes to 22, which is the default port for SFTP, and that's the one we'll use today. So you can type in another port if needed. Next, I'll need to give it the username and password that Alice gave me. Just copy and paste that in here. And then I'll need to fill in the home directory of that user. Now, if I know that, I can type it in, but I can also use this button to have AST actually log into the machine and go and find out for me. And while it's doing that, yeah, it's already found it. So this actually means that all the details I've given so far actually work because it was able to log in. Now there's some additional options I can use for SFTP. There's the encryption algorithm. I can select from a couple in a drop-down box. Usually the default is fine. If your organization needs a different one, you can select that. There's the compression option. If you're on a fast internal network, then you wouldn't need this because it will actually slow down the transfer. But if you're on a very slow remote connection, enabling this might actually speed it up. And there's the key authentication option, but we'll discuss that one later. I click next, and I'll fill in the details for the other host name. So just copy and paste the same details that Alice gave me. Username and password. Switch to SFTP. Get home directory, see if it worked. And once that's finished, I can click next. There's a couple of final options here. Verify destination file size. This is an additional check that AFT performs after the file has been transferred. It actually verifies that the destination file size is exactly the same as the source file size was. If you're transferring thousands of files in a transfer, you might actually want to turn that off because it'll do this check for every single file, and it might actually slow it down in some cases. There's the verify checksum option, but that one doesn't apply to SFTP transfers, so we'll skip that. And restart from failure. If you enable this, should your transfer job fail, if this option is enabled and you rerun the job, the AFT will try to continue the file transfer from the point where it failed instead of transferring the whole file from the beginning. So we click next. We could actually test the profile now, but we've already done the get home directory for both hosts, so we know it's working. Click finish, and the connection profile is saved. The next thing to do is to define a job that uses this connection profile. So I'm in Control Workload Automation, quickly create a new job, file transfer job, and let me open that one. I'm going to leave most of the fields as default for this demo. I click the connection profile select button, and I can see there's my connection profile. So I select it and click OK. So it's been filled in. I can still see the host details that I defined in that connection profile. And I can click Fill Transfer now. This will pop up a window from which I can select the files. And this is the server that contains the file that I need to transfer. So I go to the directory that Alex told me to go. There's the file. And I click the Add button below here, and it fills in the file name for me. So I go to the destination server, go to the directory where I want to put the file, click the same Add button again, and it fills in for me as well. And I'm done. Click OK. So there's the defined file transfer. There's a couple of advanced options specific to SFTP that I want to point out. There's an SFTP options tab on the advanced dialog where you can, for both hosts, you can override the encryption algorithm and compression option you specified in the connection profile. So if for a particular transfer you want to not use the default that you specified in the connection profile, you can do that here. So let's click OK and see if we can actually run this job. So I'm going to order it. It's uploaded and ordered. If we go to the monitoring domain, we can actually see it's already running. And it should finish quite soon. Go click to open it. Just waiting. In progress. And it ended. Had a little delay starting up there. So if you look at the job output, we can see the file transferred and completed successfully. So this file transfer will just keep running here for the next couple of months. And then we get another email from Alice saying, hey, the security department contacted me about this file transfer. And they say that we need to stop using passwords for authentication, but we should start using key authentication. Now, do you know how to do this? Well, let's see what this key authentication really is. So key authentication is an alternative to password authentication. It's based on public key cryptography. It uses a public-private key pair for authenticating the client to the server. What happens in the background is the SFTP client generates a key pair consisting of a public and a private key. The private key is kept secret on the SFTP client, in this case AFT, and the public key is published to the SFTP server. And the private key is able to generate signatures, and the SFTP server can verify those signatures using the public key. It's generally considered to be more secure, and that's because the actual keys are never transferred over the network. The only thing that the keys are used for is to encrypt pieces of information which are then transferred across the network. So the actual, instead of passwords that are being transferred, the keys themselves, in this case, are never transferred. So that's more secure. Of course, the private key with which the client authenticates itself must be kept secret, since just like a password, if someone has your private key, they can pretend to be you and authenticate to the servers. So let's see how you would do this in Control M for file transfer. So we're back in the configuration manager. And the first thing we need to do now is go to the Generate SSH key option. It gives us this window. And here we can start generating a key. We need to give it a name. So let's just call it AST key. That's just the name you want to give it to identify it. A passphrase. This passphrase is used to encrypt the private key on disk. So if for some reason someone is still able to access your files, and they would be able to copy your private keys, if you've got them encrypted using a passphrase, then they'll still be of no use to someone who does that. So in this case, I'm going to give it a very short key I can remember. Normally, we should give it a longer one. There's a couple of extra options here. The format of the key to generate. There's OpenSSH and SSH2. It depends on the actual SFTP server you're going to be connecting to. Most Linux and Unix systems I've come across use the OpenSSH format, but there's still some that use SSH2, so you can select that one. And the type of key to generate, this is where you can choose the actual algorithm, the encryption algorithm that is being used to generate the key. The default is fine. You can select a longer, a shorter key if you want. I'm just going to keep it as the default right now. So I click Save, and the key is being generated now. So the public and private key are now stored on the AST file system, and the tool is asking us if we want to save the public key locally on my computer here. So let's select yes, because that's handy. I'm going to put it here on the desktop and name it aftkey.txt. It's basically a small text file which you can copy and paste. I'll use the text suffix. So save, and that's done. Now I'll go back to my connection profile and actually start using that key. So I open it again. Hit the advanced button. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this password, so I'm sure it will not be using the password, but it will be using the key. So enable the key authentication option here. And there's a drop-down button here for the private key. And I can see this is the key I generated. So I can see it's put it in the AST, the path where AST is installed on my machine. And I need to give it the passphrase here, the same passphrase I entered when generating the key, so that AST will be able to decrypt the private key to use it. I click OK, and it's saved. OK. And let's see if that works. I validate the account. And I get a problem. Now, why is that? It says SFTP connect failed. We actually forgot one step, and that's that we need to put the public key on the SFTP server that we're connecting to, because otherwise the SFTP server won't have any means of authenticating us. So normally, in a normal situation, this is where you will send that public key to whoever is administrating that SFTP server. Of course, in this case, it's just us. So we go to the SFTP server. This is the one, and we go to a directory named .ssh. This is the default directory that OpenSSH uses for its key files. And in this directory, we find a file named authorized keys. This is the place where we need to put that key. So let me just open it in an editor. So I can see there's already a key in here. It's just a very long string on one line. And I'll need to put the key we just created in here. So I'm going to go to my desktop. This is where I saved it. I open that in Notepad. let me just turn off the word wrap so you can see it's one really big line containing alphanumeric characters. You can just use copy and paste and copy, close Notepad, go back to my window here, and just paste it into this file. And that's done. So right now, that's all that's needed. SSH knows where to find this file, and it knows how to check the keys. So I go back to my connection profile and validate it to see if it works now. And after a little while, you can see it succeeded. So we know it's using the key because we removed the password. So it really did work. We can actually try one more thing, just rerun the job. So you can see I don't even need to change anything in the job. I changed the connection profile, and the job just uses the connection profile. So even if you've got 100 jobs using that connection profile, you don't need to change anything in the jobs. And there it is. So that job just transferred the same file, but now it was using key authentication. So the user is being authenticated using a key. In addition to keys to identify users, SSH also uses keys to identify hosts to verify it is really connected to the host it should be connected to. It's a mechanism that prevents common DNS or man-in-the-middle attacks. What happens is whenever you connect AFT to an SFTP server the very first time, it stores a server key in a file named known hosts. It does this automatically the very first time it connects to a server. And every next connection to that same host name, it checks whether the key it gets from that server is still the same. If the key does not match, you get an alert. So if you're using an SSH client or an SFTP client as a user, you'll get a security warning in your screen telling you something's going on. Something changed on the server that you're connecting to. In the case of AFT, what will actually happen is your job will fail. It will end not okay. And we can actually see what happens there. In the background right now, I have actually changed the machine, this SFTP goldcard.inc machine, to connect to a different box. So if we go run the job now, it should actually fail with a similar warning. And there you go, it did. So if we look at the output here, it is saying, hey, this server is no longer the same server I used to connect to. So you either need to go check out with the server administrator whether something changed or whether there's something else going on, something fishy. So usually when this happens, you'll call that server administrator and he'll tell you, oh yeah, we've put in new hardware and there's nothing wrong there. So how do you solve that? Well, you need to tell AFT somehow that this is okay, this server actually did change hardware, and we just need to have the new key for that server. So what we do is we go to the configuration manager again and click authorize SSH host. We give it the server that was giving us a problem. That was that host name, and we click authorize. And what AFT actually does now, it just connects to that server again, gets the key, and stores it again, the new key, in the known host file. So that was successful. And we should see, if we now rerun that job, that it'll work again. It does take a bit longer, so looks good. It's probably transferring the file now, hopefully. Yes, it does. So, yeah, that's in green again. Go back to our presentation. So I wanted to share with you a couple of additional resources related to the topics we just discussed. When we created a connection profile just now, I showed you how to authorize EM users for that connection profile. There's a special procedure you need to follow when those users are LDAP users. And this first KA here from our knowledge base discusses how to do that. The second KA here describes in the case that your security department doesn't want you to be generating the private keys, but they want to do that themselves and give you the public-private key pair, then you need some way of importing that into AFT, and that's possible. And this KA describes how to do that. I've shown you that AFT stores host keys for checking hosts. Now, if you're connecting to an SFTP server that is installed on a cluster or a load balancing machine, then from time to time that SFTP server might change to another physical host, in which case the server key for that host changes as well. So you'll get jobs that are not okay in that case, unless you enable an option in AFT that will allow it to store multiple host keys for one and the same virtual host name. So this KA describes how to do that. And finally, there's a KA out there. There's some SFTP tuning parameters that you can use in case you find that AFT isn't performing the way you'd like to see. There are SFTP tuning parameters that you can use. And finally, I wanted to point out Control for File Transfer Fixback 1. It's been out for a while, but it adds a couple of new important things. It adds support for non-root agents, which is pretty important, and it's got added support for a couple of new AES SFTP ciphers. We've seen that some new versions of operating systems have dropped support for old SFTP ciphers, and for AFT to be able to connect to those operating systems, you'll need the fixback with the new ciphers. So thank you for your attention. Our next Connect with Control-M webinar will be on February 20th, and it will be about time zones. At the end of the webinar, you'll be invited to participate in a survey. Please leave your feedback, and we welcome any suggestions you may have for future topics. You can follow us on social media and make sure to check out BMC communities. There's a lot going on there. Again, thank you for attending, and we will now proceed to our Q&A session. So if you've got any additional questions, please enter them into the Q&A panel. And in the meantime, let me show you the topics of the previous Connect with Control-M sessions we've had. These have all been recorded and are available for viewing at the links displayed at the bottom of this slide.